didn't work.
Welcome to Watching Privacy. It's been quite some time. Missed that theme music. I guess technically episode 24, but we're going to call this episode number 1 of 2022. We'll call it season 2, episode 1. We'll get into a season game here. We got Raju and Brent with us as always. Good to see you guys. I don't know what this thing on Brent's head is, but we'll ignore it. Must have got it from the discount center somewhere. But good to see you guys again. How y'all been? Good start to 2022, I assume.
Yeah, it's been good. Certainly busy, and Brent probably had the best year so far.
The year got off to a pretty good start. I don't know why, but yeah, it's been a really good start to the year.
I mean, I'd argue, Brent, that if the peak of your year is in January, February, it can only go downhill from there. So maybe we should cross our fingers for the future still.
I can live with that. I can definitely live with that.
All right. Well, so starting off for this year, I think we got a couple topics to dive into. We're gonna, I guess, for new people who are joining, we'll recap a little bit about what we do. Usually every week we'll have a show like this. We'll talk about some current events in the world of privacy, our takes on different news stories and spins from our favorite companies that love to protect and abuse your privacy around the world. And we'll get into a couple more content formats in the future here. We'll make some shorts on deeper dives into certain topics, like maybe like what are cookies and how your phone tracks you and how you can kind of protect yourself. So we'll work on a little bit more educational content as well. But we'll still stick with these live streams and kind of just talk through current events. And I think we got a couple of good ones to talk about this week. So we can dive kind of right in. The first one was a story from Wired, which I thought was pretty interesting here. The unnerving rise of video games that spy on you. Players generate a wealth of revealing psychological data, and some companies are soaking it up. And so I think we all kind of know, like, there's been a pretty big rise in general of like gaming overall. I think COVID really escalated gaming. Not that it wasn't already big, but between console and PC games, I think the market has expanded quite a bit when everybody was at home for a couple of years. And as you can imagine, any kind of connected game you're playing, as most of these games are, there's an immense amount of data about you. And so going through this article, there was a lot of interesting pieces because basically it seems pretty obvious when you think about it, but at first glance, you wouldn't have noticed it. But just how you interact in that game, how decisive you are in making a decision whenever you get to like a pivot point where you pick between route A and route B, which one do you pick? What's your personality type? Are you an alpha? Are you a beta? You know, does it take you a long time to decide things? Do you keep doing repetitive tasks, or do you like adventure things and just exploring and running around in the wild? And so, you know, all the different actions you do in these types of video games, they can be used pretty, I would say, arguably pretty easily to create a pretty complex profile on your user. And every single one of these games, you're connected to the internet. You're connected to your user profile. That user profile is connected to your email. And we know that based on that, pretty much between your IP address, email, device, unique ID, and every kind of identifier that they have on you, you can create a pretty good profile on it. Did you guys pick out anything else that was a little bit more scary or interesting from this article, Raju or Brent?
I'm not a big gamer myself, but this doesn't surprise me. I mean, there are two factors, right? One is the external factors, and then there's the internal factors. I mean, external factors meaning them doing the facial recognition and trying to track your movements and whatnot. That is given, and so they've been doing it for a while. So that doesn't surprise me. So the facial recognition part doesn't surprise me. But with Oculus and whatnot, I won't be surprised if it gets into retina scanning and whatnot, another level of biometric thing that we kind of discussed about. With the internal things, the things that you're talking about, like how a user behaves based on various patterns in the game, psychologically they can put you in a certain direction. They can, or in a certain bucket, or cognitively, how are you behaving? That makes sense. I think that profiling is, I think that I know some of the games started to do that, but this certainly article throws light into how deep it goes. I think we might be scratching the surface here. We may just be scratching the surface, and it might go really deep. And thanks to Metaverse, it's only going to get worse.
Yeah, this is almost like a preview of things to come. And you think about, they were able to collect a pretty significant amount of data, even before we're getting to this point. But now think about, it's not just the games that you play, it's the people you play with, how you interact with them during the course of the game. Like how do people respond under pressure when it's a tough part? So they're getting all this incredible amount of information about what you play, who you play with, your mental state as you go throughout the game, how you interact with people as you go throughout those games, as your mental state changes. It never stops. I mean, they will never be. There's never oh, we've got it all now. You don't, and I think because of that, we're going to be constantly looking at, oh man, this is a really cool game, and then the flip side is, yeah, I wonder how much stuff they're getting on me right now, and it's just a bottomless pit of data that they mine, and they will be able to do all sorts of things. They are able to get data, and they're just saying, you know what, we don't even know what we can do with this yet. Just grab all you can right now. We'll figure it out later. And I think that's kind of the scary thing.
Yeah, I mean, one of the absolute worst things that I think have happened to games over the past years is kind of like the rise of these, I would say like loot boxes or like in-app purchases basically of these products. And I mean, just looking on like, if you go on your phone app store and trying to find a simple game like a Pac-Man or something like that, you can't even find one that doesn't have in-app purchases where you have to buy these power-ups or the app doesn't function properly. I'd rather just pay $5 and get a good quality game, but you can't even do that nowadays. And so what these companies are doing is in a lot of these like massive role-playing games, now that you have an entire like psychological profile basically being built on somebody over the course of tens, hundreds of hours they've spent in this game, it's no different than abandoning a shopping cart when you're shopping online, right? The oldest trick in the book is you add something to your shopping cart, close a browser, and wait for them to email you a 10% off coupon, and then you buy the product you want to buy. And this is no different. Like they're going to do the same thing with all these in-game purchases. And ultimately, I mean, I think we kind of know games generally tend to not pry, but target, younger people in general, kids and those who are usually spending a lot of money. So yeah, I think it's pretty scary. And I honestly think this is maybe some of the most valuable information you could really get out of somebody, because psychological information is like personal information, your age, your birthday, stuff like that. That's kind of, I guess, whatever. In a lot of places you can capture that information, but to understand someone's like decision-making habits and ability to execute something, their precision and thought process, and how many times they're willing to retry a failed mission. All these types of things are extremely important and have could potentially be long tail. Like you said, Brent, may not know what to do exactly with it today, but as long as we have it, we'll figure out something in the next 2, 3, 4 years, maybe even faster. So not a good look in general, in my opinion. Not surprising, but go ahead.
The expansion I see is critical here. As you rightly pointed out, Tejas, where the in-app game purchases are critical for their business model. But metaverse is basically gamifying the life. And recently, I read someone purchased land next to Snoop Dogg's property in a metaverse for millions of dollars. Well, millions of dollars is a pretty good in-app purchase, and I don't know how the commission structure works, but certainly there is, so which means the in-app purchases in the entire ecosystem is blowing up.
I was told real estate is a good hedge against inflation. Maybe metaverse real estate is similar concept. Who knows?
I paying millions of dollars for some digital right to say I've got the digital house next to. What the hell is that all about? What do you get from that?
Brent,
I'm not there yet.
In my metaverse, I have a Rams team for sale.
Brent is acting like he wouldn't pay a few dollars to buy like a digital version of a trophy.
How much would that be?
I'll find you an NFT, Brent. It'll be your first.
All of these, the gaming and whatnot play right in the hands of some of these companies whose business models are built on attention economy, right? So Facebook or Twitter or TikTok, all of these, the more time you spend within those apps, the better it is. And gaming plays right into it. That explains why Facebook is big into Oculus and Metaverse and whatnot. This is all about attention economy. The more eyeballs, the better ads and whatnot. So there is that dimension to it. So, and it's a matter of, especially the social part that Brent is talking about. All you need is one person within your gamer network to be online. A push notification will be sent to 20 others and saying, "Hey, John Doe is online, and are you game?" Right. So, and then it basically gets into the attention part, and so that is a addictive thing. So you're going to see a lot more people stuck in their basements in these metaverses or these online games and waste their youth. Again, I'm not a gamer, but I'm not happy about this trend.
I mean, I think earlier in the year, China had that whole thing where they like banned I think under 16 from playing online games from like 9 p.m. to I don't know, the next morning, I guess, on weekdays or something like that. So certain levels of restriction, basically to like encourage some sort of in-person activities or something along those lines. I think a lot of the media that came out around that was maybe a little bit not as nuanced in terms of the details, but I mean, under 16 kids, these are all kids. I'm not sure I'd go with the entire like draconian, we're just not going to let you play aspect. But at the end of the day, clearly they're seeing something wrong with this kind of system, and they'll happily, I guess, create those games for Americans, but they want to throw in people playing them, I guess. So kind of a tricky situation for them over there too.
Part of it is also psychological manipulation, or to put it bluntly, on how to make someone keep playing. And it is typically the kids who don't have the conscience to understand what these companies are doing, because their business model is dependent on our business model / paychecks are dependent on other people being addicted to what they're doing. So that's the reason they had these so-called psychology majors or whatever you call them. And that's I'm glad some companies or some countries are taking some steps, but I think there has to be some limit, and somebody has to draw the line.
Even like you were mentioning about how these companies are getting into games. Even I read Netflix is trying to get into gaming, I think with some limited success. But I mean, for them, I think the CEO Ray Hastings is like popular for saying like, their only competition is attention and sleep. Like, we're fighting for 24 hours a day, and how can we maximize eyeballs for that? And adding gaming is a clear way to add it beyond just watching shows. And so, yeah, I think games is definitely here to stay and going to be popular, but I'm not sure you can really do anything. Games are, I guess, one of those things where it's like it's a pretty big walled garden. It's hard to protect yourself in any way, really, in any meaningful way, I don't think, really. So I guess play at your own risk.
From that point of view, I liked the concept of Wordle, where they said there is only one app and one word, and that's about it. Just play the game and move on. Please don't stay here. But with its
was that before New York Times bought it or after?
before New York Times bought it, yeah.
All right.
Yeah, I'm not holding my breath now.
But I think that's fine, because play it once a day. That means come back tomorrow, come back the next day, keep coming back.
And the beauty is you're only spending a few minutes there, and you don't have to come in. But which means it was initially, at least the creator's intent was to just do that and move on. But looking at New York Times acquisition and the fact that they've added a few trackers in there, I'll be surprised if it stays that way.
Well, how many trackers did they add? Pretty much everything that they would have from the New York Times, right? 9 trackers on this page. Yeah, pretty much everything you can imagine. DoubleClick, Google, Yahoo, Blue Sky, ad servers, everything's on the site now.
Who's who?
And basically, like, then you'll get sponsored words. Pepsi will be the next word, probably in a couple of months when you got to make a few bucks. You'll find a way to sneak things in there. So
the next, the word is thirsty, and then all of a sudden you see an ad with Coke or Pepsi.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Another thing, I think one of another interesting piece at the very tail end of the article I thought was kind of interesting was they talk about this app called Go 365. I'm trying to find it. I'm pretty sure it was called Go 365, right?
Yep.
Yeah, Go 365 health insurance apps. So this was kind of a curveball too, because I know there's another app called Rally that Go 365, I think, partners with Aetna. Rally is an application that partners with United Healthcare. And I'm sure a lot of these healthcare providers are providing these apps. And basically, the way the apps work is if you give it permission to access like your movement and your steps and all that kind of stuff, you can earn some points. And basically, based on those points, you can maybe redeem it for, I don't know, like a t-shirt or a mug or like a fitness tracker or something along those lines. But in this Go 365 example, it says, Go 365 health insurance app solicited information from users such as blood glucose levels, sleep cycle, diet, whether they drink or smoke, or wider family medical histories, using gamification logics of points and rewards to develop more profitable personalized insurance profiles. These identified categories of risk that preclude some from certain kinds of insurance or drive up in their premiums. And then a couple other articles as I started digging into Go 365 was the prices can vary by over $1,000 in situations like this, just based on this information that you get. And so kind of we talked about earlier last year about how like cars will have these devices that track you for car insurance quote discounts and stuff like that. Healthcare is trying to get into the same realm here. And it's not really a game, but it's the attempt, like Raji was mentioning, of the gamification of these things in order to capture as much information as humanly possible. And then people ask, I don't care if they track me. Well, when your insurance premium goes up $1,000, then you start caring, and you would have no idea because they'll say that every quote is personalized specifically to you. And how do you compare quotes now, right? It becomes very difficult.
What was that you said? Profitable profiles, right? That's essentially what they're trying to. That's what they're trying to do, where they identify all these patterns and say, okay, this is going to be a risky person to insure. So which means the chances of them going to a hospital is high. So which means they're going to be less profitable for us. So we're going to. There is something in there for them for tracking this information. All of this tracking will result in, end of the day, customer paying the price. So them tracking your behavior, your income, your expenses to give you high prices for a certain product in an e-commerce site or maybe in your travel site or indirectly through the profiles and whatnot. So people think, hey, I don't have anything personal to hide. Well, yeah, you may not have anything personal to hide, but the other ways you're being impacted. Yeah. And this is one thing where, well, next time you may not get the insurance coverage you may want because they may deem you as a risky for a certain condition that based on their correlated data.
Yeah. Well, think about the potential of the gaming companies and the health insurance companies, and like let's say like the Uber Eats of the world. So you're sitting around playing a game, so you're getting all that data. The health folks are like, so these folks are just sitting there for 5-6 hours at a time straight. And by the way, they're ordering pizza and eating, drinking Coke at the same time. So all this data becomes connected in a way that, like Raju said, is like, nah, we're gonna pass on your insurance, dude. You sit around 10 hours a day, eating pizza and playing games. You don't do any getting up. Your sugar intake is ridiculous. Your cholesterol is. I'm surprised you're still alive. So no, we're not going to deal with you.
Yeah, I just go ahead.
Don't be surprised if you see in-app purchases because you play game 3 hours straight and in-app purchase to have a pizza delivered to your doorstep, and those are coming. Yeah, I won't be surprised if they're already here.
Yeah, I think I thought of probably the scariest thing, or maybe a genius business idea, is kind of like how you have credit reports for financial history. You would have basically another kind of mysterious company that you don't really opt into, but it has all of your personal health information. And every one of the major health carriers, basically, just like a credit card company will talk to Experian for your credit score, these health insurance companies will talk to this third-party company that aggregates all this data from all different places in order to find out what your health score is. And based on your health score is just like you approved or denied on a credit card, you're either approved or denied or varying levels of coverage for healthcare. I wouldn't be surprised if someone's already thought of this. I hope I did not give someone a crazy idea, but this has to be a thing. Like there's no way that there isn't some kind of sharing of information.
I won't be surprised if Apple goes down this path. Yeah, it's not a bad company to go down this path. I think I heard they're already going down the path of credit score, is now in the Apple Card, Apple Pay, and they're going down the part of the financial thing. But on the healthcare, and health seem to be an important area for them, between Apple Watch and Apple Health and various aspects. I won't be surprised if they have some kind of a health score, and on top of it, partner with some insurance companies. But then, yeah, sharing information certainly is a key. But if there is one vendor, I would, relatively in a better shape to maintain the data, at least for now, is Apple. But once Apple does it, you will see various other companies do it, and who knows how well they take care of the privacy information.
Yeah, for sure. All right, let's switch gears a little bit to this other story we kind of touched on last year as well. But Google bans apps with hidden data harvesting software. And so basically, we talked about this. There was an app called App Census, if I remember correctly. And basically, people would install this app as, or not an app, it's an SDK. So basically, for like non-technical folks, when you're building an application for your phone, it's made up of a bunch of different software development kits or SDKs. You might have a Facebook SDK, you might have an analytics SDK, maybe you have a messaging SDK, and these are basically like prepackaged components that are leveraged in the application to execute some kind of functionality. And so Google basically banned applications that had this specific SDK in them, because what that SDK was doing was, as you can imagine, tracking an insane amount of your information. And so one of the quotes from here, it says, the apps containing measurement system software were removed from the Google Play Store as of March 25th, according to Scott Westover, a Google spokesperson, for collecting users' data outside the rules Google had established. I mean, pot calling the kettle black, but beyond the point there. Mr. Westover said the apps could be relisted if the software was removed. Some are already back in the App Store. And so basically, what this app was doing, I don't think that quote probably tells the full picture there, but another quote from it here says, measurement system software ran inside more than a dozen applications, including numerous Muslim-themed prayer apps. And the software kit was present on apps downloaded in at least 60 million mobile devices and likely more, according to the researchers. And this app would collect all this information and then share it with different sources, sometimes government as well. And I mean, I'd say arguably this is a good step, but I mean, it's bad that I guess it got to this point. Did Google do the right thing here? Was it too slow to act? What did you guys kind of take on this story? I think you could see it from a couple different angles.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly don't support tracking and data harvesting, user data harvesting without their permission, right? Generally, but I smell hypocrisy here. It is Google typically that harvests data from various apps, and Google is everywhere. Open, I think in previous season we talked about privacy report from Apple on an iPhone. If you open the privacy report thing, you'll notice that every single app, almost every app, has Google Tracker embedded in them. So it is Google that is collecting all this information. So now maybe Google banning or having to ban someone else that is doing the same thing as they are doing, it is a hypocrisy there. There's a hypocrisy there. But now imagine this scenario. What if Apple does the same? Apple considers Google's trackers as very similar to what this third-party company is doing. Will Apple ban every app that has Google Tracker in there? Because that'll probably be banning 50, maybe even 70% of apps on the App Store. And it's going to, because something like a Google Analytics I consider as a tracker, right? It is essentially a tracker. Now, recently, I think there was some news about Europe possibly banning Google Analytics. Mm-hmm. Will that mean banning several apps from App Store that has Google Analytics embedded, whether it be in App Store or Google Store? Because this one certainly has implications, because the concept is essentially the same. It's not about, in this case, this information was outed and that's why Google acted on it. But these guys are trying to have it both ways. and it's not an easy one to go through. So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out.
This kind of reminds me of the Showtime show Super Pumped. I don't know if either of you are watching that, but it's like the show about Uber and Travis Scott.
Yeah.
And there's a couple of scenes that talk about how the Uber app is collecting data and going against the Google policy. And then when Google finds out, they call them in. First, we're threatening to take your app off the marketplace, and of course, if that happens, they're dead. So then they have them come in and explain and kind of grovel, and then they said kind of at the end, we're not going to take your app out. Are you kidding? We just want you to be a good citizen to a certain extent. So it's like it's this thing has been going on for so long, and it's been the Wild West. I think it's going to take a Herculean effort if you really want to safeguard this data to do, because it's just ingrained in the culture of apps. So we'll see. I think is it more we want you to go by our rules, or is it we're really safeguarding data?
Give us a slice of that pie, and you're fine.
Yeah,
because we don't want you to get more information on our platform and do that and compete with us later. So play by our rules. Yeah.
I mean, I can't imagine how many of those kind of like handshake deals basically happen, right? Because ultimately it's enforcement on Google's part to actually say we're going to take the app down. If they just choose not to enforce it very strictly, and then Uber set some kind of data sharing policy buried in terms and conditions, and you would have no idea, right? I mean, it's a matter of enforcement and not equal enforcement, as we've seen in a couple different cases with some different apps over the past couple of years.
Yeah, I mean, on the internet, the concept of one vendor controlling doesn't exist. In case of mobile, it's a duopoly. It's sad that we had to get to this stage, but that's where we are, and there has to be an open marketplace somewhere, and unfortunately, that's where we are. That's not where we are. So we'll end up seeing this where vendors' interests are going to be in conflict with various other providers' interest, and we'll see. I mean, it's sad that we had to get to this stage. I think we're going to see the unraveling of these stores hopefully in coming years, because there's no other way, and there's no way this duopoly could last. Particularly, it's not just a duopoly in a single country; it's a global duopoly.
Yeah. I mean, even on going back to what you said earlier about the Google tracking piece, I always was kind of a little bit curious. Maybe you have an idea, Raju, of when the iOS update came out last year, in terms of like Facebook wants to track you across multiple sites. How come that doesn't happen for Google? Because we know Google is tracking links and embeds and universal IDs across multiple apps on your phone. Yet I don't know if anybody ever made a big deal, or if, I mean, I have the whole thing off and disabled by default, so I never get the prompt anymore. But do you know how they skirt it versus how Facebook is the one getting, or at least claiming to be so heavily affected by it?
I mean, Facebook doesn't have an equivalent of Google Analytics. Facebook doesn't give you the analytics and the information, the usage, and all of that. They don't have a product there. Do you?
So is that the guise of Google? Google will just say we're an analytics SDK, even though that analytics SDK is collecting information and then being used for other purposes. But because we call it analytics, then it doesn't get counted like Facebook would.
Exactly, and they have multiple. I call these Trojan horses. Google will give you a free font. Well, that's right. That's another Google Analytics way to track you, right? So these are all various. So Google is really good at having multiple Trojan horses embedded in there. So there is this company like Measurement System. This article talks about what they are doing is very similar to Google Analytics, right? And just that it is being highlighted. And they take this information and they collect this information on behalf of these third parties like service providers, financial services, and whatnot. In this case, Google itself is the data broker. Others are collecting data for others. But in this particular case, because Google is so embedded throughout, particularly in Android, where you have to, every time an app is invoked, Google knows about it. Just like every time an app is invoked on iOS, Apple knows about it. So you see the dominance between Google and Apple there. Now Facebook is a third party; they don't own the OS, and that's why they don't have the same advantage. On top of it, there are multiple products that Google offers that Facebook doesn't, that enable them to track all this information across the board. And more importantly, if you look at some of the trackers Google has, I think they have a new domain. I think it's called appmeasurement.com. Of course, it doesn't say Google,
Of course.
but it is a Google domain where they use this for app measurement, and that app measurement thing can be seen across various products out there. Why is it? Well, there is a simple SDK that is embedded across the board, and the users get something out of it. The advantage is now Google has the ability to correlate this mobile data with web data, and that again, the Google Analytics advantage. And various other advantages come into play.
Can I add one last thing? I was in a conversation earlier this week where a stat came up that said by 2025, 70% of the people accessing the internet it'll only be through mobile. Does that make privacy a bigger challenge than it is today?
I'm just for sure, because like the mobile apps are like, these like black boxes you open. At least on your browser, you can install like your ad block things, and you can track like what do you call any kind of traffic that's happening to your computer. And you open a browser, you have a better sense of like what's actually being sent and received out of that machine. On a phone, because it's so locked down, maybe on Android there's some special apps that do a little bit better transparency there, but on iOS, because each app is on its own, you have no idea what that app is actually running in the background. I was going to say, like, even when Raju was talking earlier too, like the step that Apple made in terms of those privacy labels inside the App Store, I think it's like the most basic thing in the world, because ultimately, I mean, yeah, you see it, but you don't really know, like when it says like this information is linked to your identity, what does that mean? Like, where is that information then going? What SDKs and what other data sources are embedded inside this app? I don't have access or visibility into the code or anything. And so you're just, executing an app and hoping that the developer, wasn't a terrible human being or greedy, one of the two. And you just don't know. So I think with the rise of mobile and these kind of like more closed off ecosystems, you're not going to have any kind of visibility into that. The metaverse or VR is going to be no different. That's the same reason why, like Raju was saying, Facebook doesn't own anything in mobile, so they want to own the OS for VR basically, right?
And it doesn't help that the two dominant providers of mobile networks or mobile platforms also have ad-based business models. This is where Apple having an ad-based business model to me is such a bad idea, because in terms of trust, it doesn't move the needle for them. But if they're really pro-privacy, they shouldn't even be doing ads. So they can go all in that, but that is a bad move from their side. But
and such a small sliver of their revenue, right? It just seems like such a weird thing to like try to invest in to optimize some ads, and maybe you make. I mean, to them, $1 billion is nothing, right? So like, I don't think they're probably making an insane amount from those App Store ads, but it obviously just creates an inherent conflict of interest, which is just no good for anybody, right? I think their editor picks and stuff like that are good, but you don't need to have ads that pop up all the time.
Yeah, you would think that conflict of interest just wouldn't be worth it. What was it, the last quarter they made 21 billion in profit, and not revenue. We're talking profit. So why did he? I would think it would be such a great move, to say, by the way, we're not going in that direction. We do fine as it is on selling products and services. We don't need to sell data on top.
Didn't Apple have like in-app ad network as well? Do they still have that? So that still exists too. It's not just App Store ads. It's actually like those banners that used to pop up in like older games, and that was a app network that was run by Apple directly, right?
Yeah,
and
I guess also ads for TV, Apple TV specific ads.
Yeah. Well,
but it doesn't move the needle for them. I mean, that is the what is the price of trust? It comes down to that.
Well, I guess we'll find out. And speaking of all this sorts of tracking and our friends at Apple, it seems like this AirTag is still being discussed, I guess, Raju's favorite invention of 2021. Am I being tracked? Anti-stalking tech from Apple. Tile falls short. Tile's been around for a long time. Apple's come up with this thing, pretty new. Obviously, a lot of advantages being baked into the operating system. They recently had an update back in, I think, February, where they were supposed to make it a little bit more around transparency in terms of a device following you, being more proactive about the notifications and stuff like that. Did you guys think this article said anything new, really, or did you see anything about the update, or is it just same old? These trackers are scary.
I'm going to defer to Raju on this one.
No, there's nothing new here. Everything is the same. Whatever we were worried about is just playing out as is. I think just for like we mentioned when AirTags came out, and we've been saying it since then, is Apple with AirTags opened a new can of worms. Just like Tile was there earlier, but not just like Apple style. They make it really easy to use. Now tracking and surveillance is very easy to use, and that's not a good thing.
Yeah.
So because they have opened a can of new worms, and we are still in the early stages, I'm worried about the downstream consequences. So there are certainly some upsides, but to me, the downsides far exceed the upsides. So Apple currently offers it at a certain price. Very soon, there's going to be a new vendor that will offer the same capability at maybe 10% the price of Apple, as it usually happens. And they'll figure out various ways of monetizing it, which means selling your information. And a lot of people who are unaware of the consequences will buy it and will end up using it, in the process giving up their information unknowingly. And how does that lead? Where does that end up? So I'm not worried about today, but I'm worried about 3, 5, 10 years from now. These can of worms will end up in places where the surveillance part will be prevalent. It's Apple really unleashed a problem here. I think that's what I'm worried about. It is an irony that the company that is interested in providing or protecting privacy opened a new surveillance channel through which the privacy can be abused. I think it'll hurt Apple more than help them, certainly on their privacy stand.
Yeah, didn't they do? Even when you have the best of intentions, if you leave a certain door open to anybody almost to go walk through it, it's gonna happen. It just feels like there's too much of an incentive for folks to try to figure out how can they manipulate things to their advantage. So even when somebody does something with the best of intention and a good positive outcome in one way, it's not up to them. Once that door is open, the good and the bad come in, and I think that's just the battle that we're all faced with. Technology isn't evil on its own. It's the person who uses it that makes it either good or bad. And I think that's just there's too many people out there who have the bad intentions that are looking to use great technology in a way that makes it bad.
Gotcha. I think that's a perfect note to wrap on too. Thanks a lot, Brent, for the perfect summary. Go ahead, Raju.
No, they tried to update a few things since we last spoke. Particularly, they tried to do a tracker, or they call it Apple Tracker Detection App or something.
Yeah.
As we said, it's a tracker to track trackers. So they have introduced that, and look at it. For the possibility of detecting a tracker, you install a tracker that tracks you all the time in the background, as Google says, and you are in the fear of being tracked. And all of this, if you look at this entire thing, was introduced by them in the first place. A problem that was created, and now we are in this mess.
Yeah.
And this supposedly came from a company that respects privacy. That is the irony of it all. And I think, as Musk says, the most ironic scenario will be the most likely outcome, right? And that's what's happening. The company that is trying to be privacy friendly is the one that introduces a new surveillance thing that basically screws the privacy.
Yeah, and Google's "Don't be evil" turned out not to be quite so accurate either, maybe, and a few other things. But all right, let's wrap here. I think this was a great come back into getting into full swing on these kinds of shows every week. Like I said in the beginning, we'll have new content, different types of stuff. If you have ideas or feedback, lead comments, things like that. We got a Twitter that we're starting to use now. I think it's Watching Privacy. You should be able to find it. If not, it'll probably be in the comments somewhere. And yeah, I mean, great talking to you, Brent and Raju. It's been a while. Hoping we do a lot more of these, or looking forward to doing a lot more of these. And yeah, I don't know why you're tipping your hat to me, Brent, but whatever makes you happy. Maybe it's just a goodbye. If I have a hat, I'll tip it to you too. All right. Good seeing y'all. See y'all next week.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.